Good day to each and everyone. I am Keith Mopon, and I am tasked to report about the nursing leadership and management roles and functions in directing topic about collective bargaining, unionization, and employment laws. So what are the objectives? First is to identify the major legislation that has impacted the ability of nurses to unionize, identify factors that influence whether nurses join unions, describe the relationship between national economic prosperity and existence of nursing shortage and surpluses, and the unionization rates of nurses. Identify the large unions representing healthcare employees and nurses in particular. Identify the steps necessary to start a union. Debate philosophically the potential conflicts inherent in having a professional organization also serves as a collaborative bargaining agent, and reflect on whether going on strike can be viewed as an ethically appropriate action for professional nurses. Explore labor laws regarding overtime and working conditions present in the state in which he or she lives or will seek employment. Explain how equal employment legislations has affected employment and hiring practices. Describe current legislation that seeks to eliminate gender-based differences. Identify how the Civil Rights Act and Americans with Disabilities Act and the Age Discrimination and Employment Act have attempted to reduce discrimination in the workplace. Identify the purpose of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. And lastly, identify the strategies for eliminating sexual harassment in the workplace. So collective bargaining, unionization, and employment law significantly influences the directing phase of the management process and may impact management effectiveness. Nurse leader managers then must understand the interrelationship of unionization and management, the need to adhere to legislation regarding employment practices, and the impact of both on the healthcare industry. In addition, leader managers must be able to see collective bargaining and employment legislations from four perspectives: the organization, the worker, general, historical, and societal, and personal. Managers who can gain this broad perspective will better understand how management and employee can work together cooperatively despite unionization and implement legislation. Many individualized countries have adopted an attitude of acceptance and tolerance for the difficulties that may occur in managing under these influences. However, in the United States, many organizations view these forces with at least some resentment and hostility. Leadership roles and management functions associated with collective bargaining, unionization, and employment laws. So what are the leadership roles? First is self-aware regarding personal attitude and values regarding collective bargaining and employment laws. Second, recognize and accept reasons why people seek unionization, creates a work environment that is sensitive to employee needs, thereby reducing the need for unionization, maintains an accommodating or cooperative approach when dealing with unions and employment legislation, is a role model for fairness, is non-discriminatory in all personal and professional actions, examines the work environment periodically to ensure that it is supportive for all members regardless of gender, race, age, disability, or sexual orientation, confronts and addresses immediately sexual harassment in adopting a zero-tolerance approach to the problem, and lastly, embraces the intent of law, barring discrimination and providing equal opportunity. What are the management functions? First is understand and appropriately implements union contracts, administers personal policies fairly and consistently, works cooperatively with the personnel department and top-level administration when dealing with union activity, promotes worker identification with management, investigates immediately fully all complaints regarding violations of all collective bargaining contracts, and takes appropriate action. Sixth, creates opportunities for subordinates to have input into organizational decision making to discourage unionization. It alerts for discriminatory implement practices in the workplace and intervenes immediately when problems exist. Ensures that the unit or department meets state licensing regulations, understands and follows labor employment laws, regulates uh, that regulates the manager's sphere of influence and organization responsibilities, ensures that the work environment is safe, and lastly, works closely with human resource management to assure the organization is in compliance with employment legislation mandates. Unions and collaborative bargaining. So what is collaborative bargaining, unionization, and employment law? Collaborative bargaining is a style of negotiation which recognizes the interest of the other party and emphasizes cooperation between them. The unionization is the act or process of bringing workers into a labor union. And employment law is a set of laws that deal with the rights of employees and the responsibilities of employers. Collective bargaining is a process in which working people, through their unions, negotiate contracts with their employers to determine their terms of employment, including pay, benefits, hours, leave, job health and safety policies, ways to balance work and family, and more. Collective bargaining is a way to solve workplace problems. It is also the best means for raising wages. Indeed, through collective bargaining, working people in unions have higher wages, better benefits, and safer workplace. Collective bargaining terminologies. Agency shop, also called as an open shop. Employees are not required to join the union. Arbitration. Terminal step in the grievance procedure where a third party reviews the grievance, computes facts, findings, and reach a decision. Always indicates the involvement of a third party. Collective bargaining. Collective bargaining, relations between employers acting through their management representatives and organized labor. Conciliation and mediation, synonymous terms that refers to the activity of a third party to help disputants reach an agreement. However, unlike an arbitrator, this person has no final power of decision making. Fact-finding. Rarely used in the private sector but used frequently in labor management disputes that involve government-owned companies. In the private sector, fact-finding is usually performed by a board of inquiry. Free speech. Public Law 101, Section 8 states that the expressing of any views, argument, or dissemination thereof, whether in written, printed, graphic, or visual form, shall not constitute or be evidence of an unfair labor practice under any provisions of this Act, if such expression contains no threat or reprisal or force or promise of benefit. Grievance. Perception on the part of a union member that management has failed in some way to meet the terms of the labor agreement. lockout, closing a place of business by management in the course of a labor dispute for the purpose of forcing employees to accept management terms. National Labor Relations Board, or the NLRB, labor board formed to implement the Wagner Act. Its two major functions are to first determine who should be the official bargaining unit when a new unit is formed and who should be in the unit, and second, educate unfair labor charges. Professionals. Professionals have the right to be represented by a union but cannot belong to a union that represents non-professionals unless a majority of them vote for inclusion in the non-professional unit. Strike, concerted withholding of labor supply to bring about economic pressure on employers and cause them to grant employee demands. Union shop, also called a closed shop, all employees are required to join the union and pay dues. Historical perspective of unionization in America. Unions have been present in America since the 1790s, and union activity also tends to change in response to workforce excesses and shortages. There's a perception of whether they are valued by their employers have also always had an impact on unionization rates. Until labor law were amended, the unionization of healthcare workers was illegal. Therefore, collective bargaining by nurses at city, country, and district hospitals and healthcare agencies began in the 1960s. And in 1974, Congress amended the Wagner Act. Wagner Act, also known as the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. This act, which protects the right of workers to organize and to elect representatives to collective bargaining. Non-profit hospitals also fell under the jurisdiction of the Wagner Act. So here's the table about legislations leading to unionization in healthcare. In 1935, the National Labor Act, or the Wagner Act, gave unions many rights in organizing, resulted in rapid union growth. And in 1947, Taft-Hartley amendment returned some power to management, resulted in a more equal balance of power between unions and management. And in 1962, Kennedy Executive Order 10988 amended the 1935 Wagner Act to allow public employees to join unions. And 1974, amendments to Wagner Act allowed nonprofit organizations to join unions, and in 1989, National Labor Relations Board ruling allowed nurses to form their own separate bargaining units. So here are the union representation of nurses, which gives great impact on the nurses' unions and other healthcare workers. So the American Nurses Association, or the ANA, historically nurses have not wanted to join unions or similar organizations because they believed that these institutions were non-professional in nature. The ANA, the leading nurses organization during the early 1900s, in 1937 announced that it did not recommend nurses membership in unions because, in the opinion of the organization, nurses had in the professional organization an instrument better equipped to improve every phase of their working and professional lives. The association did, however, urge the acceptance of minimum wage and hour standards. And The NLRB, however, recognized the ANA at most state levels as a collective bargaining agent. Organizing Filipino registered nurses, a social movement unionism approach. So, the history of Filipino nurses in the Philippines and the United States. The historical impacts associated with the United States colonization on the Philippines and the development of nursing school has created a large population of Filipino nursing, particularly in the U.S. hospitals. So, this made the key part of the registered nurses workforce for unions in the U.S. Organization of the Philippine Nurses Association are the PNA. In September 1922, Anastasia Giron Tupas, the first Filipino chief of nurses and superintendent of the Philippines, and 150 Filipino graduated nurses converged to organize the Philippine Nurses Association, or the PNA, which sought to exalt the standard of the nursing profession and other allied purposes. Following its mission, the PNA created a section of the League of Nursing Education, which published standard nursing curricula, raised admission requirements to the Philippine School of Nursing, and advocated a baccalaureate program in nursing. In addition, the PNA promoted public health nursing. Concomitantly, the PNA registered Filipino nurses created a central directory for private duty employment and advocated increased salaries of nurses and government nurses' pensions. They also provided financial assistance to elderly and sick nurses and started a scholarship fund for nursing students. In 1929, the PNA joined the International Council of Nurses, or the ICN, which looked to raise the standards of the nursing education and professional ethics amongst nurses. Union membership, pros and cons. So what are the reasons why nurses join unions? First is to increase the power of the individual, to increase their input into organizational decision-making, to eliminate discrimination and favoritism because of the social need to be accepted, because they are required to do so as part of the employment based on the closed shop, because they believe it will improve patient outcomes and quality of care. So what are the reasons why nurses do not join unions? I believe that unions promote the welfare state and oppose the American system of free enterprise. A need to demonstrate individualism and promote social status. A belief that professionals should not unionize and an identification with management's viewpoint, fear of employer reprisal, fear of lost income associated with a strike or walkout. Averting the union. Once managers understand the drives and needs behind joining unions, they can begin to address those needs and possibly avert some of them. One way to remain abreast of employee potential concerns that may encourage them to seek union representations is to review the current literature and research on nurse satisfaction and dissatisfaction. When managers are aware of the concerns of the registered nurses nationwide, they are better able to assess their own staff's potential for the type of dissatisfaction that can lead to unionization. Before the union comes, the manager must know and care about your employees, establish fair and well-communicated personnel policies, use an effective upward and downward system of communication, ensures that all managers are well-trained and effective, establish a well-developed formal procedure for handling employee grievances, have a competitive compensation program of wages and benefits, have an effective performance appraisal system in place, use a fair and well-communicated system for promotion and transfers, use organizational actions to indicate that job security is based on job performance, adherence to rules and regulations, and availability of work, and lastly, have an administrative policy on unionization. Union organizing strategies. So first, meeting, both group and one-on-one, leaflets and brochures, pressure on the hospital corporation through media and community contacts, political pressure of regional legislators and local lawmakers, corporate campaign strategies, activism of local employees, using lawsuits, bringing pressure for financiers, and technology. Steps to establish a union. First, demonstrating an adequate level of desires for unionization among employees. And second, the organization is forced to have an election. The certification may occur when at least 30% of the eligible employee in the bargaining unit initiate a petition asking to no longer be represented by the union. Managers' role during union organizing. So, first, managers who are not employed in a unionized healthcare organization should anticipate that one or more unions may attempt to organize their nurses within the next few years. And nurse managers are legally defined hospital supervisors, are legal spokesperson for the hospital. As such, the NLRB closely monitors what they may say and do. Prohibited managerial activities include threatening employees, interrogating employees, promising employees rewards for cessation of union activity, and spying on employees. The nurse as supervisor, eligibility for protection under the National Labor Relations Act. The NLRB defines a supervisor as any individual having authority in the interest of the employer to hire, transfer, suspend, lay off, recall, promote, discharge, assign, reward, or discipline other employees, or responsibly to direct them or to adjust their grievances, or effectively to recommend such action if in connection with the foregoing, the exercise of such authority is not of a merely routine or clerical nature, but requires the use of independent judgment. Employment legislations. There are 5 categories for labor law. First is the labor standard. These laws establish minimum standards for working conditions, regardless of the presence of or absence of a union contract. Included in this set are minimum wages, health and safety, and equal pay laws. Second is the labor relations. These laws relate to the rights and duties of unions and employers and their relationship with each other. Third, equal employment. The laws that deal with the employment discrimination. Fourth is the civil and criminal law. These are statutory and judicial laws that prescribe certain kinds of conduct and establish penalties. And fifth, other legislation. Nursing managers have some legal responsibilities that do not generally apply to industrial managers. For instance, licensed personnel are required to have a current valid license from the state in which they practice. Additionally, most states require that employers of nurses report certain types of substance abuse to the state licensing boards. Confidentiality laws also have a significant impact on healthcare organization. Here are some of the employment legislations under which are the labor standards. These are the regulations dealing with the conditions of the employee's work, including physical conditions, financial aspects, and the number of hours worked. Minimum wages and maximum hours. For example, this is the 80 hours in 2 weeks pay period ceiling, and after which the employee must receive an overtime pay. The Equal Pay Act of 1963. This requires the men and women performing equal work receives equal pay or compensation. The 4 equal pay test exists through equal skills, equal effort, equal responsibilities, and similar working conditions. Labor Relations Law. Equal employment opportunity laws. This is the eliminating discrimination on employees with their age, gender, disability, nationality, origin, race or color, religion, mutilation, and even pregnancy. The Civil Rights Act of 1964. This prohibits discrimination based on factors unrelated to job qualifications, and it promotes employment based on ability and merit. The Age Discrimination and Employment Act. The Sexual Harassment, which sex discrimination that violates the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Then, the legislation affecting Americans with disability, Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act, and the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which provide a place of employment that is free from recognized hazards that may cause physical harm to the employees. This table shows that the legislation related to labor laws. These are the Fair Labor Standards Act 1938 has been amended many times since 1938. This sets minimum wages and maximum hours that can be worked before overtime is paid. The Civil Rights Act of 1964. This sets equal employment practices. The Executive Order 11246 in 1965 and Executive Order 11375 in 1967 sets affirmative action guidelines. The Age Discrimination Act in 1967 and 1978 amendment. This protects against forced retirement. The Rehabilitation Act in 1973 prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. Vietnam Veterans Act 1973-1974. This provides re-employment rights. The Equal Pay Act of 1963. This requires the men and women performing equal work receive equal compensation. And the California Fair Pay Act in 2016. Companies in California must justify any pay disparities between men and women doing substantially similar work. Also, legally guaranteed employees the right to ask coworkers about pay without retribution from the management. State health facilities licensing boards. Many state boards have regulations regarding staffing requirements. It is the ultimate responsibility of the top-level management to meet the requirements for state licensing. All managers are responsible for knowing and meeting the regulations that apply to their unit or department. And managers must be knowledgeable about state licensing regulations that pertain to their level of supervision. Integrating leadership skills and management functions when working with collective bargaining, unionization, and employment law. So if the organization is not unionized, the manager must use the leadership skills of communication, fairness, and shared decision-making to ensure that employees do not feel unionization is necessary. The integrated leader manager is a role model for fairness, knows unit employees well, and sincerely seeks to meet their needs. The effective leader manager also seeks to do what is just, and the effective manager maintains the required amount of staffing and ensures a safe working environment. So, the union's activity in hospital over the past 30 years has created an environment of nurses to speak out and fight for their rights, demonstrated through the advancement CNA and SEIU have made in the healthcare industry, such as the passages of the Safe Needle Law. Unions have also proven vital in providing the quality of care hospitals give. Nurses, by creating a collective voice, can improve the quality of care given a hospital while also protecting their own safety. So that will be all for my report. Thank you.